Hi, welcome to IoT North this month. April, glad to have you all on board. We've got some great talks lined up. We've got our news update from Mark. We have a great talk with Pete Gallagher, and we've got my good friend John Staveley here as well, keeping me right with everything technical. So, first in, we'll bring Mark in, and Mark, let's have your update.
Hi, thanks for that, Paul. Well, March was a long and eventful month, but it was a very good month for manufacturing. So I thought if I can manage the technology and share my screen, I'll tell you a couple of things that happened in the month. Set the context, I post what's happened in the week every Friday on LinkedIn. So if you followed me in the month of March, you'll have seen 3,750 new jobs announced and thousands more announced because of investment. A crazy amount of investment through the month, and some of the highlights were last week, the PMI index was posted. So figures of 58.9 showing strong growth and the highest figures for UK manufacturing since February 2011. If I could count 8 or 9 highlights for the month, we saw Ford announce that engines for the new Transit Custom will be built in Dagenham, so that's 1,900 jobs safeguarded. In terms of technology, we saw Rolls-Royce start the build of the world's largest aero engine in their Derby plant. Investment, we saw British Steel announce to invest 100 million to support the next stage of its transformation and also utilise more efficient green energy and green production. Talking traditional steel manufacturing there and talking the use of it, JCB created 450 new jobs, and partly that was off the back of winning their largest ever UK order of £65 million worth of excavators from Sunbelt Rentals. Higher end, we saw Rimac, the Croatian electric supercar manufacturer, announce plans to open an R&D centre in Warwickshire, so utilising Midlands British automotive excellence to support their growth. We saw Tata Chemicals announce their plan to build a £50 million plant in Northwich. We saw the British watchmaker Bremont investing and talking about opening a manufacturing and technology centre in Henley-on-Thames. Back to the more mundane things that we overlook, cardboard boxes. We saw Smurfit Kappa invest 34 million to expand their plant in North Wales. And probably one of the biggest announcements in terms of jobs was GE Renewable Energy announcing plans to build a new wind turbine plant on Teesside. 750 direct jobs just in that plant, and talk of 2,000 to 3,000 more jobs supporting that in allied industries. So, let's say March, a spectacular month for investment and also recruitment in UK manufacturing. Over 3,500 new jobs, millions of pounds of investment. So a good month. Spring is coming, and spring is coming for UK manufacturing. That's a quick roundup. Follow me on LinkedIn, please.
Thanks, Mark. That's absolutely brilliant. Really appreciate that. So lots of opportunity there, huge investment coming in here for manufacturing, and that only opens up the doors for, I'm sure, a lot of IoT use cases to be presented and help them accelerate and grow. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here, just 5-6 minutes, just to talk about what we've been up to here at IoT North. So we've been really active. We launched the marketplace, as I announced last time, to take registrations of use cases. Thanks very much to all of the companies that have registered their use cases. We've looked at them, we've validated them, we've removed the branding. Remember, branding isn't allowed on the use case because we want to remove presumption. It's nothing against you. We just want to make it nice and clear for people to see the value that you have. So we've got a little video, which literally is a couple of minutes long, for you to see how to register a use case. You've registered, you've logged in, you're going to create your use case now. I'm Paul Wheels, founder of IoT North, and thanks for watching this short video. It's really quick and simple. Simply go to create new use case. But before that, let's have a look at the other buttons. We have my use cases, so it's the page you can see now. Inquiries is when a customer has inquired with you. We will send you an email notification, but they will all be listed there as well. Billing history will be when we start charging. We will show the cost there, so you can validate everything before the bill is paid. And account settings, where you can manage your account. So going to create new use case. Here is where you create your simple and clear use case with no branding. Remember, removing that for bias and presumption from customers. Create a use case name, something quite individual for yourself, but clearly demonstrates what the use case is. Use case tags. This is to align to the verticals. We will use these tags to put them onto partner websites using our widget so they can be promoted to their contact base as well. So for example, manufacturing. You can add multiples too. The value proposition. A value proposition is a statement that answers the why. Someone should do business with you. It should convince a potential customer why your solution will be of more value than a similar offering from a competition, if there is one. So be clear, concise, and minimize technical. It's really about the value on this statement. Use case. First of all, starting with the problem. So you're sort of telling a story here. You're starting with the problem. Be clear, not technical, and very, very simple terminology. Think about the reader. Think about what the customer would be looking for here. What problems are going to resonate with them. Statistics and stuff are really good here on what the impact is. The solution, we quite often fall into answering technical here in this little block. Try to refrain from doing that. Talk about the value of your experience, your understanding, your empathy to the problem, and how you make it easy for a customer to adopt. The return of investment, a clear demonstration of cost savings, time gain, productivity, it's not always about the money. Demonstrating the value for this investment to their business and challenges. Link this to the statistics that you've put into problem is a really good trick to use as well. You then add your images. You can add up to 6. Again, 0 branding, please, or it will be removed. Files up to 4 megabytes and in the usual formats of PNG, JPEG, so on and so forth. And then you can either save as draft if you're not quite happy with it yet and you want to do some more work on it, or submit for approval. We will review, give you feedback if required. If not, we'll then get it onto the marketplace and get it launched. We are looking at soon adding a capability for you to easily upload multiple use cases rather than just the one in a go. So if you've already got them in the format, you can upload as a CSV file. But more news on that soon. Please do get your use cases registered. We have a huge demand, especially manufacturing right now. So please do get them added and we'll get them promoted for you and start connecting you to customers for free until the end of May. So when we do start charging, I can assure you it's going to be a very small fee. The fee then comes back into IoT North and we can help build and expand and help you get IoT adopted much bigger and much quicker than what we currently are today, although we are still quite big. We've got the use cases now live here, as you can see. When a customer then clicks onto the use case, there's a nice little short form on the right-hand side. This is the form that they will complete, and we will then send an introduction email to you, and it will also go onto the platform for you to see all the inquiries as well, so you can validate them. If you feel like anything is spam, which shouldn't be, we've got capture on there, but if you feel like anything's spam, just raise it with us, and we'll investigate, and if we agree, then we'll remove that from you, and you wouldn't be charged for that. And the fees are paid monthly. Once we get those use cases, what we then do is bring it into our social marketing tool, and we start using the value proposition to then drive attraction to your use case and to start to make those connections. As I mentioned, we've also got a widget on its way, which we have a number of industry specialist websites who are looking to adopt these widgets, and then by the tags, they'll be able to pull just the data that's relevant to their customers and their member base. What we've also got is a nice little place for you all to connect to that when we aren't streaming and chatting live. And please do, if you've got any questions today, do raise them in the comments on whichever stream you're on of YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and we'll answer them live to you. If you just want to say hi, that'd be great too. Let's see that you are live. And if you'd like to share some love, then always thumbs up and hearts are always good as well. If there is so we've got a number of categories here or topics in the forum. This is open source. You have control of it. You can create new topics. If you want to have a conversation with other members of the community, and we're now 5,000 strong, so please do register and be part of this. We've made this for you. Then you can create a new topic and start the conversation going. If you need any help with it, just email info@iotnorth.uk and we'll help you through that as well. Okay, so that's enough from me. Let me bring the guys in. And we've got John and Pete. 2 seconds, guys. Let me bring your mics on there as well. There we go. Hi, how are you doing?
Good. You?
Yep, very good. John, thanks very much for organising this chat with Pete and making the introduction. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. I've known Peter for a great many years. He's very active in the dev community scene. He's a very good speaker and runs Knots IoT.
And .NET Knots and lots of workshop and there's Twitch streams and we'll talk about that in a minute.
If you could bring some DevOps sanity to the IoT world, I think that's extremely commendable. I've been following his automations of getting Visual Studio Code piped onto Raspberry Pi, and I can understand some of the technical challenges around that and trying to automate that. So, I think this should be a really good talk.
Yeah, excellent. So, Pete, how did you get into IoT?
You mean other than the ZX Spectrum I had back in the day?
I was a Commodore 64 user. Yeah, I didn't get the Spectrum.
Yeah, that's fair. I went to college and then university. I didn't do A levels. I always knew that I wanted to do a combination of software and hardware. So there was a big bold guy welcoming me at the college doors, and he said, "You don't want to do A levels because you're going to be sat behind the computer. You want to solder stuff together and see how it all works." And he was right. So I did that for 4 years, and then did electronics and electrical engineering at university. And then straight out of that, I went into a job making software and electronics for a company that made change machines and cash handling electronics and stuff like that. And although, the job wasn't like massively exciting, it wasn't the being an astronaut that I wanted to be, but it did combine software and electronics, which is what I wanted to do. And I did that for about 10 or 11 years until the company folded. And then I started up on my own at that point. And things just grew from there. So that's kind of the story.
Awesome. So what's the project that you've worked on that really stands out, like you see some really big value from?
It really depends on what you mean by big value. After that, it was Thomas Automatics or Thomas Automation that went and busted before I was made redundant. Oh, just after I was made redundant. And a little while after that, a company bought what was left of that company.
Dinner time!
Nice. I'm happy with that. I'd be happy with dinner. Mine's in the oven.
As you can see, we're live.
We are all at home rather than being wined and dined in some recruitment office, probably. That company got bought by another company, and they came back to me and asked me to get involved, and they wanted to create a kiosk at that point and move from like bespoke electronics to PC based electronics, and I led the design of that. I created all the software and the kiosk and the hardware and that sort of stuff for them, and now 10 years later there's thousands of those around the country now, serving arcades as well as in sort of doing ticketing for places and stuff like that. So quite a versatile machine that you can put in loads of different combinations. So as far as value is concerned, they're really big, expensive machines, and you can't quite see it, but I've got all of the gizzards from inside those machines all on the right hand side here. And actually, I don't do a great deal of work for them anymore because they bought a company with 2 software engineers already, so they tend to use them now rather than me. But as far as sort of personal value is concerned, I don't know if you've seen this little jobby that I created a little while back. So this is a Raspberry Pi Pico-based Stream Deck. So you can't quite get it to focus, but I had quite a lot of fun designing that, 3D printing it, creating the electronics, making circuit boards and all of that sort of stuff. So actually that... and it took off. It's been in Hackster and Hackaday and on the Raspberry Pi website, and it's been all over the place. So as far as personal value is concerned, this certainly most recently trumps the kiosks.
Yeah, brilliant. Funny enough, I've been talking with Hackster quite a lot. Jessica, there, the CEO, and hopefully got some exciting things coming along with those guys very soon. It's one of my favourite websites. I lose hours on that website reading projects, if not days, let's be honest. Hey, Pete, I think that leads on really nicely to your talk on DevOps in IoT.
Yes, absolutely. I've shared my screen, so there it is. Just before we get going with this, I was saying to the guys just before this that this is probably the most complicated talk that I give. Thankfully, there's no coding in this talk. There is code, but I'm not going to be doing any coding. But just to give you some idea, I've got 4 virtual desktops set up to be able to spread these bits around. So there is every possibility that parts of this will go wrong, but hopefully you'll get the gist of what it is I'm trying to do here. And all of this is just to give you an idea of what you can do rather than tell you what you should be doing. Because there are absolutely people out there that do DevOps as their day job. I do IoT as my day job, and I dabble in DevOps. So, and absolutely, the people I do the Agile Engineering podcast with will tell you that same story. So just to go on then. So this is a talk about how we can do some DevOps with IoT. A little bit about me first. I'm a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft certified trainer. I am also a Pluralsight author. I was involved in creating the Microsoft AZ220 IoT Developer Certification exam, and I've now been involved in creating the Pluralsight training content, or at least some of it. And as it happens, all of that is free this month in April for Pluralsight, so go and check that out. That exam is a great exam if you're interested in IoT. It's well worth going and passing it. So yeah, do go and do that. I've been doing this for about 20 odd years professionally, and then since I had my ZX Spectrum before that, way back in the day. So I've been doing it for years. But I love gadgets, which is kind of the reason why I like to faff with IoT. So I end up with all sorts of cool stuff on my desk and all laid out and on desks behind me that just makes my office look like a mad professor's lab. So yeah, I'm also a STEM ambassador and a code club organizer, and that's partly because I've got 2 young girls, just like John had walking in to the background of his office there. I've got 2 young girls in there that I want to make sure get all of the facilities that they need to, and sadly there's not as much STEM in classrooms as there ought to be, and even less now with the lockdown the way it is. So it's a real crying shame, and I think it's going to put things back. So hopefully all of us STEM ambassadors can fix that. We're going to be doing a few different things today. Normally I would talk a bit about what IoT is, but look, this is an IoT group. If you don't know what IoT is, then you've come to the wrong place. So I'll skip that section for an IoT group and just talk a little bit about what DevOps is, very briefly, just in case you don't know. And then we're gonna go through various different incarnations of this, sort of building our way up to a full DevOps pipeline from a simple IoT app, and then we'll look at how we can do an open source DevOps pipeline, and then we can look at IoT Edge and Azure DevOps and see how that works. And then if there's any questions, then obviously feel free to just interrupt, because I'm happy just stopping and starting. But when we get to the end, if there's a bunch of questions, then do ask. I've also got the YouTube thing open, which I'm assuming is where a lot of the comments and questions are going to be coming from. I've only just registered for the forum, so I've not got time to click on the email link. So moving on from that. Oh,
if any questions come in, I will pop them on screen so you can see them live. Okay.
Perfect. Like proper producer. I like it. So what is DevOps? I mean, Wikipedia has it as a set of practices that combine software development, dev, and information technology ops. Really, it's just about continuously delivering some value to your customers. There's a load of words here that I think people have made up: deployability, modifiability, testability, and monitorability. That are just made up words. Really, it's just making the processes nice and fast so that you can deliver your product in the best possible state out to the customer as quickly as possible. You often see this sort of a diagram where we have a loop, essentially, that we learn from and feed back. So plan, create, verify, package, release, configure, monitor, and back. And I think actually that's a really important concept, that we must feed back whatever it is that we're going to learn back into the process so we can make that better again. And the whole idea of DevOps doesn't often sit well with IoT, certainly when you combine devices into a process there, and devices that could be out in the field somewhere, then having DevOps is actually mega important. Because the last thing you want to do is get in your car and drive around the country updating the kit that you've got around. It could be a nightmare. So just as a little plug, I'm a member of the Agile Engineering podcast with Liam Gulliver, Jonathan Relf, Louise Paling, and Misha Bell. We talk probably twice a month we release, or maybe once a month just recently, podcast episodes. So do go and check that out. We've had some fantastic guests recently. And in fact, coming up next week, we are going to record with Sarah Maston from Project 15 at Microsoft. It's an ecology-based IoT project that Microsoft have got going on to save the elephants and things like that. So that's going to be quite cool. So we'll start with a simple IoT app, and this is where things can start going wrong. So you can just laugh in the chat there. I think you just put ha 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 if you like, if things don't go quite right. But we'll see where we get to. But what we can do is we can have with it a thing, and I'm going to be using Raspberry Pis for this, and they're on a desk over there behind me. There is flashing LEDs over there, but really there was no point in me getting everything disassembled and bringing it over here so you can see flashing LEDs. We've seen that before. So everything that you'll see in here will just be messages on the screen, but it'll be fine. We'll then hook our Raspberry Pi up to Azure, to an IoT hub. If you don't know what an IoT hub, if you think of it like a telephone switchboard of the good old days where you'd have all those wires connected together, this allows all of your devices to connect to the cloud. It's something called a cloud gateway. And you can have millions of devices connecting into IoT Hub and then out to the rest of Azure. So we're going to send messages up to IoT Hub. And then locally, we're going to have a web app that's then going to read those messages from IoT Hub and show them as a nice graph on a screen. So let's do the first demo. And we'll go to Virtual Desktop 1 of 4. Actually, it's 2 of 4. 1 of 4 is the slides. So here I've got some code that's on the Raspberry Pi at the moment. I'm not going to spend much time going through any of the code. Only the parts of the code that we're like sort of interested in. But what this is going to do is just on a timer, it's just going to send some simulated temperature and humidity readings, which is hello world for cloud. And certainly if Cliff Aegis is watching, he'd be screaming at the screen, why don't you do something more interesting? It's because it's what we do. It's just normal. We flash an LED for hello world and we read a button. And then when we do the cloud stuff, we send temperature and humidity. So if I spin across to my Raspberry Pi, so I've SSH'd in using PuTTY, and I've got the code running on there, and I can run that up with sudo node app.js, and when that starts, we'll see we start sending messages up to IoT Hub. Now, if I switch across to my browser, this one, then we have got a nice graph sitting there, and it's just showing us the IoT data that we're sending up from our Raspberry Pi up to IoT Hub. So that's going from a Raspberry Pi up to IoT Hub, and then I've got a web app running locally that's then connected to IoT Hub and reading that default endpoint and grabbing that data and just putting it on a nice graph. And I mean, I might as well just stop there because that first demo worked. So it can only be downhill from here. But yeah, that sort of just gives us a benchmark. There's no DevOps involved in that whatsoever. But it just proves that we've got everything working. So that's actually running from this code here. So that's my node code. And if I stop that, in fact, tell you what I can do. I can prove that it's live, and I'm not making this up. If I just stop that code and then switch back to the browser, then you can see, look, that's stopped as well. So that's good. I can also now stop this code there because we don't need that anymore. And I can switch back to my slides a second. And as I said, there's no DevOps in that. This was just a benchmark. But we can add some DevOps, some amount of collaboration in that this is what we've got at the moment, where we've got the Raspberry Pi and the IoT Hub at Azure. We can add GitHub into this, and obviously one of the things that a lot of people do is just use GitHub to be able to manage the code on your device, and you can do that. It's not ideal, but it will work. You can have a little script on there that just regularly pulls the latest changes from GitHub. It's fine until you get some sort of a merge conflict, and then the world ends. So we can do that. That's fine. But we could move our web app into Azure, and then we can hook that web app up with some CI/CD, which in Azure Web Apps you get built in. You just hook it up to a GitHub repo, and off it goes. And then we can host our web app there sitting in Azure, so we can do that. So let's just see how that works. So this is the code that I've got locally for that same website. Just 1 second ago you saw. If I start this code up again, so it's running, and switch over to my browser, and if I close this tab, then here is the Azure version of that. It's running it. You can go here yourself if you like and have a look. PJG IoT DevOps.azurewebsites.net. You can go and you can see that same data popping out. Absolutely. At the top, if I click down here and I can make that disappear, go away. Oh, there we are. It says IoT DevOps demo. So what I can do is I can change that title and then commit the code up to the GitHub repo, and then that will trigger this mini CI/CD pipeline in Azure to update the web app. So if I go back to my code and we just put in, where are we going to put it? IoT. Let's put it here. Let's put hello IoT North, which I learnt today, by the way, is about the direction north, rather than the fact that you're based up there, New Newcastle. Just a nice double meaning. So I've saved that, and you can see now I do most of my GitHub stuff in VS Code. I can do it in the command line. It's just that I prefer to do it in VS Code. So if you're a command line advocate, then I apologise. So I can put add IoT North in that, and then we can check that in. And that should push the changes up. And then if I switch back across to my browser, then I've got the web app here, and we can see now that we're actually running a deploy already. So this is my app service, and you can go to the deployment center. And you can set this all up as I've done to automatically connect to a GitHub repo, and it just monitors for changes in that. And then if it sees any changes, it grabs it, builds it, and pushes it to the app service, which is, if you've got an app service, then this is a really nice, quick way to make sure that you're not doing right-click publish. You're actually going to go through some sort of a pipeline, albeit a very simple one here. Obviously, you could then, in your GitHub repo, you could put all sorts of different things in there for code reviews and stuff like that, and pull requests and branches. But I've not done any of that because it just keeps it nice and simple for this demo. So I've added IoT North to that. So if I switch back across to this and hit F5, now this will take a little while because it kills the app service and then it has to recreate it. So actually, although it looks like it's running, it's not. I'm refreshing the page, and there we are. There we have hello IoT North, and all being well, then we start getting the messages coming back again as well. So there's the start, the inkling of some sort of a pipeline. Although essentially we're not really doing anything for our device here. There's no that stopped now. Look, interestingly, I'm not quite sure what its problem is, but it did enough to be able to show the point anyway. There's no DevOps on our device yet. Are you looking for new speakers? Oh, yeah, you could do that. Then yeah, so that's that. So what I can do though is if we switch over now, I'll tell you what, let me just stop this code over here. Let's stop that. I've actually got some bits and bobs on here that I'm going to explain on my slides. We can make this a little bit more DevOpsy. So we've got GitHub, and we've got that connected to the pipe because we can, and we've also got it feeding through that Azure App Service in that mini CI/CD pipeline. What we could do is, we can break this link for a start, and we can add Jenkins into that. And I'll talk about what Jenkins is in a minute. And then we can add Docker Hub onto the end of that, and then put Docker on our device and deliver code that way. So that's going to make things a lot more DevOpsy at this point. It's just a lot less simple because we've got a fair few moving parts actually in Jenkins to get this to work. So I'm just going to quickly jump to the demo of this, and then I'll come back to the slides and explain what's actually going on. Reason being is that with any DevOps pipeline, there is a delay. So I like to get that kicked off and doing something, and then I can talk and then come back. So if I go to my code over here, so and I need to make sure. So this was the code here that was happily running, and I will come back to this screen in a second. All locally. On this page here, I've got a bunch of stuff running, but this is, albeit exactly the same code that was running on the device, only this is hooked up to a GitHub repository. So what I can do is I can put a little in here, where this temperature alert is, I'm going to put a little message. I'm going to put hello IoT North in there and save that. And that's created me some changes. And if I get rid of that, what I can do is, if I switch over here, I've got Docker installed on this Raspberry Pi, Docker ps-a. And so I've got a couple of different Docker containers. One of them is my code that will eventually make its way down to this device. And another one is something called Watchtower. Now, if you move on to something like Azure IoT Edge, which we'll get to in a minute, and it's absolutely slinging it down with snow here. I don't know what it's doing up north, but how crazy is the weather? What Watchtower does is it looks at Docker Hub, and it's waiting and it's polling Docker Hub for new versions of a Docker container. And if it sees one, then it pulls it down, kills the existing one, and relaunches that Docker container with the latest version. So it's just a lovely little orchestration Docker container. So a Docker container helping you with Docker containers. If your Docker container fails, then it'll automatically restart it and things like that. I mean, it's pretty good, and it works quite well. But I mean, it's fine. It's going to do what we want. But I'm a Microsoft guy, so they're going to put a lot more work into it than this project. But this is how you would do it. One of the ways you can do it. Is there any way to get around the Azure pay-as-you-go subscription? Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're going to do is free, but yeah, if you're going to do any form of Azure App Services and stuff like that, then you're going to have to pay. There's a few different ways, though. If you've got a new business you've just started up, then there's BizSpark. It might be called something different now, but essentially new companies that start up, they get, if you join this BizSpark program, or whatever it's called now, then you get credits. I think you get £120 worth of Azure credits every month, which is great, well worth doing. Obviously, if you've got an MSDN subscription, then you'll get MSDN credits, which are pretty much the same, or become an MVP, and specifically an Azure MVP, and you get almost free Azure at that point, enough that you don't need to worry too much. Although I was spinning up streaming analytics yesterday, I've left that all running, so I don't know quite what the costs are going to be for that, but either way, I'm okay. So we've got these two containers running on here, and I am going to start them up. So Docker start, starty, that one. This is where I have to try and remember what my Docker commands are as well. Start these two things up, and they are happy. And on here, theoretically, if I refresh the page, I'm not quite sure why that stopped. We should start getting messages. There we are, and those are messages coming from that Docker container. That's great. That's now running, and we've got that working, but we can add a little bit of joy into that. And in fact, what I can do is I've also got something called the Azure IoT Explorer, and we can actually have a look at those messages, so the content of those messages. So if I go in to our Raspberry Pi here, yes, it is the Raspberry Pi, and do the telemetry here, I can start monitoring the telemetry. And if we just wait, we should start getting some messages. If everything's working correctly. Come on, you can do it. I have a student account with Azure, mature student. Oh, perfect. So at the moment, we've got temperature alert false, which is fine. We're happy enough with that. That's because I think the temperature hasn't gone over a certain threshold or something like that. But temperature alert true, so it did. So it must be 30 degrees for that. So that's great. So if I go back to the code, this one over here, in fact, let's make sure that I leave these in a place where I know what I'm doing. Okay, well, I didn't need to go on there, but anyway. So we've got that temperature alert in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to check these changes in. I'm just going to put hello in there, and hopefully it'll actually let me do it and not complain that I've got some other changes somewhere else. So they've gone. Now, while that's doing that, let's switch back to my slides and explain what Jenkins is. So it's a free and open source automation server and helps you automate the non-human parts of your DevOps pipeline there. And Docker, we've got connected to it, and Docker Hub. Docker is it's a system as a service thing, an OS level virtualization product that allows you to have, if you will, many little computing objects sitting in a container that get rid of this. It works on my PC problem. And they're all isolated, but you can make them talk to each other. And you can then deploy these down to your machine from something called Docker Hub, for instance. So Docker Hub is a way to be able to host your Docker containers up there in the cloud and have yourself, but other people as well, grab those Docker containers and use them for something. So this continued demo that we've got there, I can show you a DevOps pipeline, and good, it's actually running my pipeline. So this is what Jenkins looks like. I'm sure there's a way to be able to skin this, but this is the default what Jenkins looks like. Now, I've got Jenkins running in a virtual machine in Azure. So all of this is actually Azure, but this is the open source equivalent of what I'll be showing you in a minute. So down here, we've got the state of all the different build pipelines that we're running, and we've got this 75th one going on here. Now, if I click on that and then click console output, you'll see the reason why I zip off and come back, because these things actually take a little while. And what it's going to do, it's going to grab the code from a GitHub repository. So a little bit like what we were doing there in Azure, this pipeline is monitoring a GitHub repo where my code is living, obviously different GitHub repo. And if there's any changes, then it kicks this pipeline off and it grabs the code, and then it needs to create a Docker container. Now, there's one interesting thing here. If you're going to run this in Azure on a virtual machine, you're probably going to have like an ARM64 or AMD64 rather, machine, or maybe if you're lucky an ARM64 or something along those lines. But I'm running everything on Raspbian on a Raspberry Pi, and if you create a Docker container on an AMD64 machine, it won't work on an ARM32 Raspberry Pi build. So you have to use something in between there. Both of these systems, this Jenkins version and the IoT Edge version, they have to have some way to be able to build something that's compatible. Now, what's really nice, what I like about this, what's really nice about what I've set up here is I've set something up called QEMU. So on the virtual machine, I've installed Docker, and I've installed this image called QEMU, which is an emulator, if you will. And it's allowing me to emulate ARM32 architecture. And so what happens is that it grabs all the necessary bits and then it ships it off down to this little Docker container to build the Docker container in an ARM32 compatible environment. And then it ships the result of that back. What's the difference between VNFs? What's VNFs? I don't know what a VNF is. If I knew what a VNF is, then I'd be able to tell you. That's like an interview question. And now I've not got the job. I'm not sure. Virtual network files, maybe that's what it stands for, possibly, don't know, guessing.
I've asked
you what, who?
I've asked I've asked what a VNF is, and let's see what they come back with.
Yeah, good. Well, at least I'm not the only one. If you'd have come back and said, Pete, I can't believe you don't know what those are, I'll learn something today. Well, I'll learn something every day. Virtual network functions, interesting. I'm not sure. I mean, a container is a little blob of executable code, and I suppose maybe a virtual network function would be as well. I guess maybe they're like Azure functions. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Are they a similar trick to that? Is that how that's working? And I'm guessing actually it's going to be very similar, little isolated blocks of code that can run. I think you'll find Docker containers are a lot more complicated because they tend to have almost a full operating system in that Docker container. So you'll have like Buster or Stretch or something like that. So it'll be based off a Linux image. Having said that, I think Azure Functions do a very similar thing as well. So there's a blog post and everything. So yeah, I appreciate that. I'll definitely have to go and check that out. Virtual machines or containers, which is better. Interesting. We'll have to check that out. Interestingly, what we can see at the bottom here is that we have finished. So our bits and bobs are finished. Actually, if we scroll up, I might be able to see the QEMU stuff happening. Where was that? All the libcurl stuff and bits of operating systems, rsync and stuff like that. Where's QEMU? It's like somewhere up here, I think. Either way, it's in here somewhere where it's creating that whole pipeline. But you can see it's pulling down a whole heap of stuff here, installing Python and stuff like that. Actually, there's QEMU, look, where it's doing that bit. I'm actually flashing LEDs as well in there, and I think I'm using turn on off or whatever it's called. Pete, would it be possible to set up a battery monitor through Azure, basically for free electric fence batteries? I'm designing a LiFePO for fence battery and would like to monitor when it's recharging. I mean, one great place you can start for that is IoT Central, actually. And you can monitor, you can have 2 devices in IoT Central. In fact, if you get the free tier, you can have it for 7 days with 5 devices, but you can have 2 devices for free in an Azure IoT Central project. And what Azure IoT Central is, it's software as a service, and it gives you IoT Hub, time series insights, stream analytics, storage, maps, a whole heap of nice bits to device provisioning services, stuff like that. And you make device templates and you then provision devices up to that, and it's dead good. You can make dashboards and everything. It's sort of a solution fast start rather than you having to tie all those complicated bits together. And so, yeah, you can definitely do that so long as that little device that you've got along with the battery for the fence can talk to Azure. And I know an ESP32 that can absolutely do it. And in fact, if you get an ESP32 TT Go, that's got a GSM modem on it. And although that can't talk directly as a GSM modem to IoT Central, you can hook that up to an Azure function and then have the Azure function talk to IoT Central, and Bob's your uncle. And I've done a couple of projects like that and they work really well. Alternatively, you could go directly to IoT Hub with HTTPS, but that's going to be complicated. And then you've got all the other services to hook up as well. So yeah, there's that. Back to the code. On the other tab, I've got Docker Hub, and I've not refreshed the page yet, so you can see we've got latest and 74. So it says a few seconds ago. It wasn't a few seconds ago. That was just the last time I ran it. If I F5 that screen, we should have 75 on here. And of course, it's not going to be in any sort of order, is it? Look, so it's just going to do it that way, which is just really annoying. So we go oldest and then newest. And there we are, 75, pushed 4 minutes ago. So I've been waffling for 4 minutes. That's good. That's fine, because hopefully what that will have done is given me time to update my Docker image. Thank you, says Graham. Thank you. Thank you for the question. We can see that actually over here, we are getting messages. So something is still happening. And if I do a Docker PSA again, then, oh, look at the timing was absolutely superb. We can see here that we've got a new 59-second old version of our Docker container. And it's picking the latest one. So we don't know what that actually is. But if I switch back across to here, look at this. The temperature alert now says, hello, IoT North. So we've got code sitting actually on my PC. It's not on the Raspberry Pi. And I made those changes and I pushed those up to GitHub, and that fired a pipeline in Jenkins, which is running in a virtual machine, off, that grabbed that code from GitHub, and then it began the process of creating a container, and that is using Docker in the virtual machine and QEMU to be able to make a ARM32 compatible container. And then once it finished doing that, packaged it, sent it off to Docker Hub, and then back on the Raspberry Pi, we've got Docker running, and we've got Watchtower as a package, and all we do is we just give it the necessary credentials to be able to hook up to the particular repository, not repository, but you know what I mean, the container area in Docker Hub, the name escapes me, and it monitors for the latest versions of that, and it pulls it down, kills the existing one, and puts the latest version on there. So actually, I'm pretty proud of that as a pipeline. There's quite a lot that you've got to get set up to get it to that point, but you can see that obviously, this isn't great for a test and development type scenario where you want a change to appear pretty quickly. So you would probably do your development directly. You just wouldn't have this as part of that pipeline whatsoever. You'd just do your coding either directly on the Raspberry Pi or you'd push it, as John mentioned, using something like rsync. Maybe you could push the files across down to the Raspberry Pi and run it that way, which is definitely the way to do it. Do your development on your development machine and not on the Pi. Although you can get VS Code for the Raspberry Pi now. So if you feel that way inclined, then definitely you can do that. So with that running, so that's happy. I'm going to leave that running because why not? It's not going to do me any harm. But I'm going to stop these messages here. And I'm going to switch back to my slides. Oh yeah, that's because that's on there. I need to do that. So what is the Microsoft way? Bill Gates, bless him. So this is what we've got at the moment running on there. So bear in mind that actually I've got 3 Raspberry Pis dealing with this demo. So we've got one little Raspberry Pi 3. It's not even the 3B Plus or whatever. It's just a Raspberry Pi 3B. That's the one that's got Docker on it, and that's the one that also had just the base code that we were benchmarked with to begin with. Then I've got a second Raspberry Pi 4 that I'm doing the IoT Edge stuff with, but it will just work on a 3B Plus. It's fine. But you know, the Raspberry Pi 4 has got way more oomph, so everything should work a lot faster. So the Microsoft way is to get rid of Jenkins and get rid of Docker Hub. And then we can have a container registry, which replaces Docker Hub in Azure. And we can get rid of Docker on the Raspberry Pi, and we can put the IoT Edge runtime on there. So IoT Edge, what's that? So it's a fully managed service built on Azure IoT Hub that allows us to be able to deploy our cloud workloads to run on edge devices as containers. So it is a container-based system. So they reckon by 2023 there could be 20 times as many smart devices at the edge as regular network conventional IT vaults. So edge computing is absolutely massive already, and it's only going to get bigger. So having some way to be able to manage these devices so that you can move your stuff actually out of the cloud down to a local device is definitely the way forward. So we've got this Raspberry Pi, and we've got a container register in IoT Hub. So we have an edge device, and it has this Azure IoT Edge runtime, which is like the orchestrator. So think of this like the Watchtower Docker container that I had sitting there on the other Raspberry Pi. Then we can have all these different modules that we can have running. So you can have ones that are sending telemetry, ones that are doing machine learning and AI at the edge, or you can even have Azure functions that run at the edge here as well. So we hook that lot up to IoT Hub. Now, obviously, if you're doing all of your processing through the cloud, then there's going to be a latency involved in that. So once you start hooking up things like robot arms and cameras and cars, for instance, you can't have latency. I mean, if you've got a Tesla and you're waiting for the cloud and suddenly you lost connectivity, you're going to crash. So you have to do that processing locally, because otherwise that response time's not there. So running your workloads at the edge gives you that low latency response time. It also, you can use it for things like processing streams of really boring data. So that robot arm is working for 99% of its life. But when something goes wrong, that's the point that you want to alert somebody and perhaps kick off some sort of a cloud workflow. So you can process all of that, hundreds of edge computing, exactly, hundreds of millions of lines of data. You can process all of that locally and then only send the important stuff up to the cloud, which is great. And another one is security. If you're processing perhaps personally identifiable data, then you could strip and anonymize all of that data before sending it to the cloud. So things like that really help with edge computing. So let's have a little demo with that. Now, what I should have done is kicked off the pipeline before I went and talked about that. So that's my failing. But we can come back and we can talk in a bit. So I've got some code here that is running. Now, you've got this concept of modules that I showed you there. So you have ones that send telemetry and machine learning and AI. So you have a module and you deploy that, and if you will, a module is a container like the Docker containers. You then deploy those up to the container registry, and the IoT Edge runtime then monitors that, much like Watchtower did, and brings down the latest versions of those containers. So it orchestrates all of that system for you, as I say, just like Watchtower. So we've got stuff happening here, but I've not got any of it running. So if I switch over to my Edge device, we can do an sudo IoT Edge list, and we can see, actually it is running. I'm lying to you. I didn't stop it. In here, we've got Docker containers. It uses something called Moby rather than Docker. That's the only thing, but they are Docker compatible Docker containers. So we've got a simulated temperature sensor, and of course, this is an IoT demo, so we are going to be sending temperature and humidity sensor data. And then we've got an Edge agent and an Edge hub. The Edge hub works like an IoT hub does in the cloud, but it just orchestrates the messaging between the modules and also up to IoT hub locally. The Edge agent, which is the one that I said was doing the orchestration of all of this, that's keeping everything running and updating everything. And then we also have this node module down here, and this is a little module that I've added in there, and it's grabbing the simulated temperature sensor data and filtering it. So we're saying that if the temperature goes over 25, then we're going to send that message out and add a little property to it just to say, your house is on fire or something like that. So that's all running at the moment. And in fact, if I switch across to the IoT Explorer tool again, if I go back to my devices and we go to our IoT Edge device and we go to telemetry again and we click start, then we should start seeing messages appearing in our console at the bottom. So again, these messages, like that little telemetry block, they will go from, and hopefully it'll start appearing in a minute. Oh, I'll tell you what the problem is. The simulated temperature sensor module, it sends and it creates an incrementing simulated temperature. That's just, you can grab this. It's like a marketplace, if you will. Just like Docker Hub, you can go grab other people's containers. You can grab these modules out of the marketplace. So somebody else has made this code. So I actually need to restart that simulated temperature sensor. So I will have done that. So let's see if I can do that restart, and let's do this actually. Let's see if it lets me do that. I might need it should be fine. Restart my simulated temperature sensor, and that's done that. So if I switch back to here now, as I said, what we've got is a little filter function, and it's only going to start sending messages, just like I said, when there's actually a problem. So when we get this temperature alert, that's when it starts sending messages to Azure. So a bit like the robot arm that we said, it's 99.9% is fine. It's only when something goes wrong that we actually want to start sending stuff to Azure. So simulated temperature sensor is going to create a temperature every now and again. It's going to keep sending it. It's going to rather keep sending it through the packages on the device to my filter function, and the filter function is going to compare that temperature to 25. Once it goes over 25, then it's going to send the message up to Azure that hopefully we'll be able to see if everything's working. Be a little bit disappointing if this doesn't work now, and then we'll see that here with that alert on it. It can take a little while because it's got to send those messages, but hopefully it'll actually start. I'm actually looking at the right device, IoT Edge device. It is this one. Let me make sure that everything is working. Up for a minute, so it should be sending something. My node module is also running. Oh no, there we are. Oh, good. So you can see now, if I scroll down a bit, we've got message type alert. And that's great. So we've got the IoT Edge system is actually working, which is good. Just a little benchmark, just to make sure that we can do that. The demo gods are very kind. Trust me, I mean, you can see how many different pieces of code I'm trying to demonstrate here. And geez, every time I agree to give this talk, when it comes to the night, it's I say to myself, I'm not going to do this ever again. Does the IoT Edge runtime support deploying graphical applications such as an Electron app? No, not really. You could probably deploy a web app and dial in that way. So that's as close as you're going to get, but it's not going to give you anything graphical. So it won't be like running a virtual machine or anything like that you can sort of dial into and see a GUI. For doing that sort of stuff, for graphics on the Pi, I tend to use Uno platform. And if you go to my Pete Codes website, then there's a blog post on there about how to make a system where you can deploy the code down to your Pi directly from your PC. There's no DevOps involved in that, but it just means that you do all your work on the PC and send it to the Pi. And that gives you the graphics for that. I don't tend to use the Pi for anything graphical whatsoever. I just tend to use it for the processing. And then you can use something like IoT Hub or, SignalR or anything like that to deal with the communications side, and then just offload all of the visual stuff to a web app or something like that. So I'm hoping that answers that question. So yeah, good. We've got a message type of alert there. So that's all well and good, but what we don't have is any DevOps in that, of course. So if I get some code up, so got got to get the right things on here. So let's have a look at this. So not that one. So here's an Edge solution. Now I can modify this and send it directly to my Raspberry Pi if I like. And so I'd modify this code, and then down here I can right click on this deployment.json and I can build and push the IoT Edge solution. And that would then push this built code. It would build it locally, obviously, first. And it would push that up to the container registry, and then the Pi would then pull that back down again. And that's great. You can go off and do that, and that's going to work really well. But what's the reason why that works directly like that is because I've got Docker installed on my machine, and whatever magic IoT Edge is doing and the tools are doing locally, it's able to build ARM32 compatible bits and bobs, which is great. But I'm not going to do that because it gets complicated, and I've done that in the demo before, and it just makes life a little bit complicated. So what I've also got here is pretty much exactly the same code, only what I've done next to no differences here actually. So, but what I can do is I can change this alert here to say hello IoT North. So got a theme. If I save that, then we've got a change. So add IoT North. I check that in. So that's a GitHub repository. Actually, it's not. If I switch across to my browser and we go to Azure DevOps here, hit this one. Hello, stop. Let's do this then instead. Then, as I explained, Azure DevOps is Microsoft's version of Jenkins, if you will. It's a lot more complicated than Jenkins. We've got things like boards, but it's a full CI/CD system. And in here we have repos, which is where our files live, and we've got pipelines, and we have build and we have release pipelines. So if I go to pipelines here, why they've separated pipelines and releases, I don't know. But what this little thing here is telling me is that we are running. So I've checked the code in and it's kicked this pipeline off. So add IoT North. If I go into that, then we have one job running. So we have the idea of agents, and agents are virtual machines in the cloud, essentially tiny little virtual machines that we can use to create our Docker container, if you will, our IoT Edge module. So it checked the code out here. So it grabbed it from this particular location, wherever it is, just there. It found a bunch of stuff, pulled it in, so it's using Azure repos over there. It pulled that in, and then it replaced a bunch of tokens because it's good. We're connecting to IoT Hub and stuff like that. We don't want all of that to appear in these logs. Keep your secrets secret. And then it builds a module image. Now, what's interesting with this is that actually it can't build it in Azure DevOps. Well, it can, but it will build just like the problem that we had with Jenkins. It will build an AMD 64 image, and it's just not going to work on the Raspberry Pi. So what you can do is you can use something called self-hosted build agents in Azure DevOps. So you can install another runtime on a device of your choice, and you can ship that part of that process off to a self-hosted build agent and build it on whatever platform you like. So I have another Raspberry Pi with this DevOps agent running on it, and it runs there and it sits and it just listens, and Azure DevOps then calls into this device, and it passes it the necessary bits and bobs that it needs to be able to build, in our case, this module, this IoT Edge module, locally on an ARM32 device. So, I mean, what's brilliant about this is you are building it on the actual device. So QEMU is great, but it's an emulator, and it's going to emulate one specific thing. Now, every single Raspberry Pi is different, so it's entirely possible you could expose some problems with your code that are specific to one particular hardware line. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Raspberry Pi. This could be anything you like. And Raspberry Pis are great, and they're great for, like proof of concept development and that sort of stuff, but there are hardened solutions out there. So you would install it on one of those. And kind of think of this like if you've done any Apple development, then you kind of need to have the Apple device there. It's like a little gatekeeper, but this has got a reason other than making money for doing that. So it's shipped it down to our Raspberry Pi, and in actual fact, we can have a look at it if we wanted to. So on home, so if I take a copy of this, copy that, and I've actually got the build device sitting here, and I can do a CD into that. I need to go back. Oh, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I copied, is it? I didn't copy that. I wanted this. Let's do that. Copy. And paste that in. Oh, yeah. I know this. There we are. And do a dir. And there's the bits that we've deployed. So the code that I've got on my machine gets sent up to the Azure repos, GitHub repo, if you like, and then combined into bits like you can see here, and then sent down to this Raspberry Pi device. It builds the container image, the module, and then it ships the result of that, the artifact, if you will, back up to that pipeline, and then the pipeline does what it needs to do with the rest of it. Which, I mean, here we've got pushing module images out to, there's a bit of duplication here actually, but pushing images out to our container registry and copying files to a drop folder. And you'll see where the duplication comes from. So we've got these artifacts here, and then it just says everything is completed. But if we go to releases, then we have a release and a new release pipeline, which is currently in progress as well. Release 60 at 6:59, in fact, it's 7 o'clock. I don't know what time I'm supposed to finish, but if it's 7 o'clock, tough, I'm still going. I've not got long left. And I can click the logs for this. And we've got an agent job. And in fact, if I scroll up, then we've got download artifact, and it grabs that artifact, which is, the built bits that we had before. And then it generates something called a deployment manifest, which I showed you in the code. But a deployment manifest sort of describes how to deploy, obviously, the module, but also the routes for messages in and out and the versioning and stuff like that. So it creates one of those. And then it actually sticks it in there and says, I want to get this deployed. So sort of shortcuts the whole process and says, right, tell IoT Edge to go and pull this image down. IoT Edge would do this automatically to a point, but in IoT Edge you have the idea of a deployment, and you create a deployment for your device. So that's the list of modules and their versions, and IoT Edge is constantly checking that. Just to backtrack a little bit, you have an IoT Hub and the concept of devices. You also have an edge device, which is a slightly different device, where you have these modules in there, these Docker images. So a bit like Docker Hub that we saw, we've got that list of images. Now, we can actually see some of that. So if I go actually back to the IoT Edge device, so this is the IoT Hub, and I'm in the Edge devices page here, and this is our IoT Edge device. And if I scroll down, we've got a bunch of stuff here that it's saying. So actually, if I refresh this, then it's got a bunch of stuff that's saying that it's been reported on the device. If I go to my node module, let's see what we've got. Version 75 on there. So was that the version that we were building? I can't remember. Can you? Pipelines. Let's have a look. Can't remember what we were building. 76, yeah. So it's not quite there yet. This is the reason why I should have kicked stuff before. I would have thought I'd have been talking for long enough, but I think it's because this release pipeline. One of the reasons why this is slow today, I would guess, is that pipelines in your region may be impacted by a live incident. Actually, it's been going on like that for a while now, so I don't know quite what it's playing at. So let's go back into this and see where it's getting to. Still in progress. Tasks 5 out of 5, so it should be about done. Continuous monitoring, it's just enabling that. So it should have deployed it, so it should have done that part by now. So go back to our module details. So this will take a little while to sort itself out. So what it's going to do, of course, it's got to pull down the latest version of that Docker image, it takes a little while for it to do that and then report back up again. So while that's doing that, I'm going to flick back over to my slides, and then we'll come back and hopefully it'll have finished. So let's go all the way back here to my slides. We've just done a demo. So Microsoft Azure DevOps, in fact, I didn't talk about that. So we have the idea of repos, pipelines, boards, test plans, artifacts, and you can run it on your server locally. This is the reason why it's more complicated than Jenkins. It just gives you all these extra features. So that works quite nicely. So we have this whole idea of IoT Edge running on there. We've got rid of GitHub, and we've got the Azure repos sitting there now. It really doesn't make much difference, but it just keeps it all in one place. So we have our IoT Edge device, and we've got VS Code, and VS Code is pushing out to the repo. It's going through a build and release pipeline, and then the IoT build agent is getting involved on another Raspberry Pi to build us a compatible module, and then that ships it back to the pipeline, and the module then gets pushed to the container registry, and then the container registry then is orchestrated through IoT Hub and the Edge runtime to be able to pull that latest version back onto the device. And that's what it should be doing. Let's see. It would be a shame if this last demo didn't work. Let's have a look at the container registry and see where we're at for that. So we've got this repository in there. Let's see where we get to with that, see if we got a newer version of that. And in fact, we have. There's 76. So we have actually got the built container on here. It's just that IoT Edge is being slow at picking it up. So it's got as far as the container registry. All of this is finished happily. Oh, look at that. I don't know why that's taking so long. But what will happen is that over on here, these messages, that will say, hello, IoT North, when it actually does pick that up. So we'll leave that be, and we'll come back again. So I'll do some more slides. And flick to my slides. So there's a bunch of links here, so you can go and learn about Azure IoT Hubs. In fact, I really should have a link to my Pluralsight course on here now. I forgot to put that on there. And then there's some information about Jenkins and Docker Hub, and I stole my Jenkins and Docker Hub demo to a degree, or at least the idea for it, from that link, that YouTube link. And this is a couple of people on stage, and they've got I'm not sure if it's a Raspberry Pi, but a device there with a bunch of NeoPixels hooked up to it, and they're able to do very, very similar thing with Watchtower. So I saw that and I definitely got to have a go at that, because that looks like the way forward. So it took me a while to figure it out, but that's where I got to. Then there's IoT Edge. You can find out a bit more about that there. There's a great IoT Edge deep dive there. I think it's Pamela Cortez. She's fantastic, one of the Azure PMs in the IoT team. Go and watch that video. And then there's some information there about Azure DevOps. Would you share some idea about GitHub Actions? Yes. Would it overlap? Yeah. It's nowhere near fully fledged enough to mean that we lose Azure DevOps. I think a lot of people are worried about that particular concept, where Microsoft are most certainly pushing GitHub Actions, and it's great. GitHub Actions is fantastic. And in fact, that first demo of a tiny little bit of CI/CD I showed you with the deployment center, you can flip that around and you can actually deploy with GitHub Actions directly from GitHub out to an Azure App Service and do it from that direction. And I've done that too. And that works really well for your CI/CD pipeline. And you can keep it all in GitHub Actions. You can have, obviously, your reviews and stuff like that, and branches, and only trigger the pipeline if you're in the main branch. And so checking into your dev or your test branches doesn't trigger it. There's absolutely a way to be able to do a lot of what you want to do, but as you saw in my slides, if I go back in my slides, oh geez, way back, it doesn't have all of these things. So you've got the repo and a pipeline, but you don't have boards, test plans, the idea of artifacts, if you will, not really, and you can't integrate your own build agents and things like that. So there is an overlap. And the long-term vision, I would say, is that eventually it will all be in GitHub, but we are a long way off that. Another reason why we're a long way off that is that Microsoft themselves are using Azure DevOps, and so they're fully invested. So it's not going anywhere and still being developed. If all you want is a really simple, concise DevOps pipeline that doesn't do a great deal of interaction with Kanban boards and stuff like that, then GitHub Actions is going to work for you. If you want a fully featured system, then Azure DevOps is going to be your way forward for that. So yeah, definitely go check that out. There's a bunch of ways to contact me here. Twitter is by far the best way. Just send me a message on Twitter and I will get back to you. I'm happy to help with any of your IoT life problems. Email is great, but there's just so much spam that I tend to miss people's emails. You can also contact me on my website there, the peakcodes.co.uk website. There's a contact form. I do tend to spot those because they stand out quite well. As we kind of mentioned right at the very start, I run Knots IoT. This month we've got Sarah Maston coming from Project 15. So not only is she recording the podcast next week, but on Thursday at 6:30, Knots IoT will have Sarah Maston talking about it. We'll also have a guy from Whipsnade Zoo, Alistair from Whipsnade Zoo, and they've got an ecology project working at the minute, actually tagged as elephants taking selfies, but they're trying to figure out ways to stop elephant and human interaction, stop injuring both sides of that party. I also co-organised .NET Knots with Jess White. So do come along and check that out. Knots Dev Workshop is an in-person meetup that we've just not been doing because really you need to be in person. And also Lati is kind of in-person networking group based around Loughborough. So none of those two have been happening recently. But Agile Engineering Podcast, do check that out as well if you're interested in anything DevOps. The slides will be available at that bit.ly just there. I've not uploaded them yet because I was still editing them 10 minutes before I came online. So there's that. So do fire more questions at me while we go back and check to see whether or not we have a version 76. Come on. Yes, we have a version 76. Woohoo! So if I now switch across to, tell you what, let's have a look at this first and then do this IoT Edge list. We should see that, there we are, so it's been up for 3 minutes. It took a while, and this is the reason why you don't do it for a development or test lifecycle. Maybe test, but not for development, because you don't want to wait that long, do you, to test your code? That'd be really bad. And if I get my IoT Explorer tool, we now have Hello IoT North on there. So every single one of my demos worked, which is just truly miraculous for saying how many different demos we did there. The demo gods are most certainly very kind. So with that, I've finished that miraculous talk that I may never give again.
Pete, that was absolutely brilliant. We have well and truly overrun this week.
Yeah, apologies.
But I think it was definitely worthwhile. We only lost a few viewers, so you've definitely kept them engaged. That was really, really good. Thank you very much. John, do you have any questions?
Not for me. I've clearly got some reading to do on IoT Edge and how that all fits together. But
it's dead cool.
Great presentation.
Brilliant.
I think it was Reza is one of the authors on Pluralsight that's been doing the AZ220 IoT Edge stuff. So that's a good place to go and start because that'll be quite filtered down and give you a good introduction. But that deep dive for an hour with Pamela as well is a great one to go and look at. That one, the IoT Edge deep dive there is worth watching, so go check that out.
One question from me.
Yes.
With edge computing and leveraging Azure IoT Edge, what if you're in an environment that won't let you connect to the cloud? For example, manufacturing.
Yes, there's a few different things to come into that. The beauty of IoT Edge is it has an intermittent or offline mode, so it must connect once to be able to do its orchestration, download modules and stuff like that. After that, you can set it into a mode where I mentioned there was 3 different modules. There's an agent and the modules you run and an IoT hub, essentially, an edge hub. That edge hub can act as Azure at that point, and you can have all your devices connecting to that edge hub. And if you deploy some local storage, you can store as much information as you possibly like locally, and do all your processing there. So you can do machine learning at the edge if you like, stream analytics at the edge, time series insights not so much because that's a graphical thing, but then if you wanted to, you could then go online every now and again and you could send all of those stored messages up in the order that they were received and then do some form of machine learning up there in the cloud as well. Or you could deploy just the messages that are relevant, the ones with alerts, if you will, for the robot arm idea, and do it that way. But it can run indefinitely offline, but it obviously has to connect once to begin with.
Our next month's speaker, Olivier Bloch, does a talk.
Oh, you've got Olivier! Woohoo!
Yes, on just that subject, on updating disconnected IoT devices.
Olivier's fantastic. That is going to be a fantastic talk. We had Olivier last month at Not So IoT actually on an AMA type session. And,
You grabbed him first.
We did. He's awesome. Olivier's a really nice guy. So yeah, do if you're a fan of IoT at all, then do go and check that out. You're going to have a lot of fun. I might have to go and join that one too. Yeah,
Brilliant.
Olivier, good man.
It was almost like that was set up, John. With me having that lined up. So we also have
Paul.
Yep,
You've got your face is gone, and I can say there we are. That's better.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. That's the poster for Olivier.
It is.
I just did a quick screen grab.
Oh, okay.
Because I was speaking. Let's blot him out.
Yeah. We don't want to see John.
I would never do that, John. Thursday morning 8:30 a.m. we have IoT North Breakfast Club every Thursday 8:30. Short 20-minute shows. This one is a panel discussion on why user experience is key to technology product success. Very relevant to IoT as things are evolving and platforms are becoming much more intuitive and enabling people to do more with less. So we've got Helena Hill, Damon Dalton, and Henry Latham joining me for a 20-minute chat and to give you some insight on that as well. Usual places to catch us, so do subscribe to the LinkedIn channel, Facebook, or YouTube. Whichever one you're on now, click subscribe, and you'll get those notifications for that. We've just got a couple of questions that I've just popped through. What are like the startup costs for environment? If you don't mind, Pete, because we're running so over time, if you can pop onto YouTube and just answer the questions that we've got coming through from Charlie, Houston Brown, and Zayed.
No.
See, Pete pretended to be a nice guy, but...
Absolutely. I don't mind doing that. Yeah.
Hey, Pete, that's been absolutely brilliant. I've really enjoyed the show. I truly have. And John, as always, thank you very, very much for your help and support. I'd be lost without you. I truly would.
We all would, actually. We all would, you know.
He's definitely a big instigator and supporter of IoT as a whole. So thank you, John. Really appreciate it. And
quick message. I think we had an offer of a talk in the chat. If you're interested in doing a talk, please get in touch.
Yes, that's quite right. Email info@iotnorth.uk and we'll take that on. Arit, he and I have spoken a few times. He's a young entrepreneurial developer who's been smashing Hackster hacks in the past. So I've had a few chats with him. Very, very smart guy. So we'd love to have you on. On that, I shall say good evening.